Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session Cloud Security Avoiding Misconceptions and Employing Security Based Practices. And I am Ritika Chakraborty. I will be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules for our attendees. The session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which the last 10 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A.
Did you know that you can be part of the lucrative cybersecurity industry? Even top companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, Facebook, and Dell all hire cybersecurity professionals. The cybersecurity industry has a 0% unemployment rate. The average salary for an entry-level cybersecurity job is about $100,000 per year in the United States. Furthermore, you don't need to know coding and learn from your home, and you get a scholarship to kickstart your career. Apply now. EC Council is pledging a $3.5 million CCT scholarship for cybersecurity career starters. Scan the QR code on the screen to apply for the scholarship. Fill out the form.
A very important announcement for our audience. As a commitment to closing the cybersecurity workforce gap by creating multi-domain cyber technicians, EC Council pledges 3.5 million towards CCT education and certification scholarships to certify approximately 10,000 cyber professionals ready to contribute to the industry. If you want to know more, kindly visit our website given in the chat section. Also, we would like to announce to our audience about the special handouts. Take the screenshot of the running webinar and post in your social media like LinkedIn or Twitter, tagging EC Council and use the hashtag CyberTalks. We will share free handouts to our first 10 audience. Now about our speaker. Sentil is a self-proclaimed technical evangelist known for his passion for solving business problems and optimizing IT infrastructure. Sentil has successfully assisted numerous customers in achieving their goals throughout his career. He has worked closely with renowned technology partners, including Druva, AWS, Commvault, EMS, NetApp, Cisco, VMware, Microsoft, HP, and many more. Recognized as a bona fide champion of cloud technology and software as a service SaaS, he firmly believes in minimizing technical management to maximize output. His deep understanding of the fundamentals and inner workings of these technologies has helped him addressing inadequate technological integration challenges through elegant, effective, and cost efficient solutions. With his passion for pushing boundaries, Senthil holds his unwavering commitment to team success and is a force to be reckoned with in technology and business. So now, without any further delay, I would hand over this mic to you, Senthil.
Hi everyone, Sentil here. I'm a staff solutions architect currently working at VMware Australia. My focus is on VMC on AWS, and I've been in the IT industry since 2002. So close to about 21 years now. I'm originally from Malaysia and have had the privilege of helping customers solve their complex IT problems throughout my career. Over the years, my focus has been on security and how IT organizations can further optimize their IT spending and get most out of the technology that they have invested in. My policy in IT is keeping it simple and elegant. Today, I want to share my opinion on the misconceptions about cloud security among cloud customers. Our moral compass for the session here will be based on the shared responsibility model, which is often misunderstood by cloud adopters. I would like to take this session to explore the implication of the misconceptions and some suggestions on how best we can overcome them. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this subject as well, so please keep the questions coming. So, the cloud service provider, which is the CSP, and the cloud consumer, CS, have an adversarial relationship. This is due to the differences in their business goals. What does this mean? Let's look at it further. The primary reason why a customer wants to move to cloud is to maximize the consumption of their computing resources, improve their security posture, and reduce their overall cost in consuming these resources that has been provided to them by the cloud service provider. The cloud service provider, on the other hand, wants to maximize its profit while minimizing what they would have to offer you in terms of computing resources and security controls. There is a disclaimer here. This doesn't mean that the cloud service provider are taking you for a ride by offering substandard services. No, far from it. Cloud security providers take extreme measures to be fully compliant and be regulated. However, they ultimately run a business and its objective is to be profitable, hence the shared resources and multi-tenancy model of the cloud environment. SLA, Service Level Agreement, allows the cloud service provider and the customer to negotiate their terms and conditions for mutual benefit, as despite the differences in their business objectives, there's a lot of mutual benefits between the partnership as well. The cloud service provider will strive to achieve the agreed SLA between the customer and provide excellent customer service and try to exceed the customer's expectation to ensure repeat business. The customer, through a mutually agreed SLA, will be able to ensure that they obtain the level of service that they want from the cloud service provider. A cloud service provider that attempts to exceed the customer's expectation will be able to provide an improved customer experience while also ensuring that the TCO, the total cost of ownership, is in the benefit of the customer. What is the shared responsibility model? The shared responsibility model is a comprehensive security and compliance framework that clearly delineates the obligation of both cloud service provider and the customers in ensuring the security of the entire cloud environment. This includes securing hardware, infrastructure, endpoints, data, configurations, settings, operating systems, network controls, and access rights. Regrettably, the concept of shared responsibility is prone to misinterpretation, leading some to assume that cloud workloads, along with its associated application, data, and activities, are entirely safeguarded by the cloud provider. Consequently, users may unknowingly run workloads in public cloud without adequate protection, leaving them susceptible to attacks targeting the operating system, data, or applications. Even meticulously configured workloads remain at risk during runtime, as they may be vulnerable to zero-day exploits. The shared responsibility model establishes the division of duties between the cloud provider, e.g., all your famous cloud providers out there, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, and its end users, whether if it's individual or a company. According to this model, the cloud provider is responsible for monitoring and addressing security threats to the cloud platform and its infrastructure. On the other hand, the end users bear the responsibility of safeguarding their data and other assets stored within the cloud environment. I know there are multiple iterations of this diagram, and you probably would have seen it from other cloud service providers. My attempt to show this shared responsibility diagram in an inverted pyramid is to emphasize the burden of responsibility from the perspective of the customer versus the cloud service provider. The cloud elevates the customer's operational burden as the cloud service provider manages and controls the various components from the host operating system and virtualization layer down to the physical security of the facilities where the service operates. On the customer side, they assume responsibility for managing the guest operating system, including updates and security patches, along with any associated application software. Additionally, configuring security-related aspects, such as firewalls, falls under the customer's purview. The extent of the customer's responsibility depends on the specific cloud services they choose, IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, and how they integrate these services into their IT environment and compliance with the relevant laws and regulation. Though the customer might own a lower number of entities in the cloud, and there are certain overlaps in terms of responsibilities depending on the type of cloud, it's undeniable that the customer is ultimately responsible for their data, application configuration, identity access management control, and access to their virtual instances in the cloud. It's commonly referred to as security of the cloud versus security in the cloud, as you would have seen how I've marked it with the color red over here. Security of the cloud refers to the cloud service provider's responsibility for protecting the infrastructure that supports all the services offered in the cloud environment. This includes the hardware, software, networking, and facilities running the cloud services. On the other hand, security in the cloud relates to the customer's responsibility, which varies based on specific cloud services that they utilize. For example, in the infrastructure as a service offering, the customer is responsible for performing security configuration and management tasks. For more abstracted services, the cloud service provider handles the infrastructure layer, operating systems, and platforms, while the customer manages their data, including encryption options, asset classification, and permissions using identity and access management control tools. The shared responsibility model between the cloud service provider and the customer also extends to IT controls. The management, operation, and verification of the IT controls are shared responsibilities, indicated by the overlaps of the curly brackets over here. The cloud service provider can assist in relieving the customer's burden of operating controls by managing certain controls associated with the physical infrastructure deployed in the cloud, which were previously managed by the customer. As each customer's deployment in the cloud is unique, they have the flexibility to shift the management of specific IT controls to the cloud service provider, resulting in a distributed control environment. Customers can utilize the control and compliance documentation provided by the cloud service provider to perform their control evaluation and verification procedures as needed. Below and over here are the examples of the type of controls and its management: inherited controls, shared controls, customer-specific controls. Let's look at this a little bit more. Inherited controls. These are controls which are fully inherited by the customer from the cloud service provider. These include physical and environmental controls. The term DC at the bottom refers to the cloud service provider's availability zone and regions. Shared controls. Controls that apply to both cloud infrastructure layer and the customer's layer, but in separate contexts. The cloud service provider provides the requirement for the infrastructure, and the customer is responsible for implementing their controls within their use of the cloud services. Examples include patch management. Cloud service provider patches the infrastructure, while the customer patches the guest OS and the application. Configuration management. Cloud service provider configures the infrastructure devices, while the customer configures guest OS, the databases, and the application that runs on the virtual workload. Customer-specific controls. Controls that are solely the responsibility of the customer based on the application that they're deploying within the cloud services. Examples include service and communication protection or zone security, which may require a customer to route traffic or zone data within specific security environments. In summary, the shared responsibility model not only implies the operational aspects but also extends to the management of IT controls. By understanding their respective responsibilities, customers can effectively utilize the cloud service provider's documentation and services to enhance their overall security and compliance posture. Let us now review the most common misconceptions of the cloud customer. Obviously, there are numerous other misconceptions out there, but I wanted to focus on the ones that I believe are related to cloud security. Misconception number one: the cloud service provider is responsible for my data security. This is one of the most common statements that I've heard when speaking to clients about cloud security. The customer goes, the data is in the cloud, we are a very big customer for the cloud service provider, and we spend hundreds and thousands of dollars in consuming the workloads of the cloud. Additionally, we are a very big brand for the cloud service provider, and they have ensured us everything is under control and our data is safe. This cannot be further from the truth. As explored previously, we have reviewed the shared responsibility model. There are specific SLAs that will dictate on how the service will be provided, and there are specific rules and responsibilities and controls that indicate who is responsible for what. The data stored in the cloud belongs to the customer. As the owner of the data, the customer is responsible for safeguarding its confidentiality, integrity, and its availability. You might have an overzealous account manager that will go, yes, Mr. Customer, we, the cloud service provider, have everything under control. Don't you worry. However, when things go wrong, and they will, history has shown us this, you, Mr. Cloud Customer, are essentially responsible for your data. An interesting point to note for anyone that is part of an organization that holds personal identifiable information, or more commonly referred to as PII. Under current laws, no cloud customer will be able to transfer risk or liability associated with the accidental or malicious disclosure of your PII data. Your organization, if it's involved in managing or holds PII data of any kind, is ultimately responsible for any breaches or exposures of that data. It does not matter if you're using the cloud service provider to host your data and your cloud service provider has all the relevant compliance certification to hold the PII data. Let me take it a bit further so that it sinks in. It does not matter if the breach or exposure of the data was due to a result of negligence or due to an attack on the cloud service provider. Your organization is ultimately held accountable for the unwanted release of the PII data. Misconception number two: my cloud service provider's cloud environment is static and reliable. Majority of the users that move their workload to the public cloud tend to be aware of this misconception. They are aware that their on-premise application are now moving to the cloud, and some of them will be using the native services provided by the cloud services provider to ensure the application run as intended. As such, considerations of redundant network connectivity to the cloud, data availability and reliability of the data has been taken into consideration. Hence, we'd offer here CTOs and CIOs talk about hybrid cloud presence. Critical workloads that are key to the business, which needs to have high RPO and RTO and does not tolerate any latency, will be retained on your on-prem data center. However, this misconception is very common among customers that subscribe to native SaaS offering that is provided by these cloud vendors. Organizations that subscribe to native SaaS application have a misconception that access to the application will constantly be available. Often, in most cases, these applications are critical to their day-to-day tasks, such as word processing, presenting application, accounting systems, payroll, or sales information processing application. Customers fail to realize that the providers of these services have very similar constraints that the customers would have when hosting these applications on-prem. The service provider would have probably catered redundancy to ensure reliable service. However, they will not be able to guarantee 100% service availability and will fall back to the agreed SLA with the customer should there be any outage on the service that they offer. These cloud service providers would have documented this in their service availability segment in the customer agreement or the master customer agreement. A service availability of 99.5% translates to 1.83 days of downtime, while a service availability of 999, which is 99.9%, translates to 8.77 hours of downtime. Those downtime may seem small, but it could mean a lot of data loss for critical business environments. Misconception number 3. My CSP provider monitors and audits my cloud environment. While CSPs do implement various monitoring and auditing measures at the infrastructure level, customers also play a crucial role in monitoring and securing their own cloud resources and application. Although most of the major cloud service providers in the market are SOC 2 compliant, which ensures that they will need to offer basic logging and auditing functionalities, it is up to the cloud customer to leverage these capabilities effectively and complement them with additional tools and best practices to meet their specific logging and auditing needs. A comprehensive cloud security and compliance strategy often involves a combination of built-in cloud provider features, third-party integration, and customer-led initiatives to ensure a robust logging and auditing practices. The key fact here would be the cloud service provider enable logging and auditing to ensure that they are and remain compliant. Though these services can be extended to specific applications or native services used by the customer, it will not have all the smarts that are required for the customer to be compliant. Misconception number 4. My cloud service provider will have a copy of my data in case I need to restore them. This is the justification that I hear from most of the customers that I speak to when I speak to them about backup and ransomware recovery. My cloud service provider is hosting my data, and they've ensured its availability and reliability via the agreed SLA, and we are good. These are all correct. Yes, the cloud service provider has agreed to a certain availability and reliability of the data that is hosted in their environment. They do this by geo-syncing and replicating the data between multiple AZs to ensure that there are multiple copies of your data. The same cloud provider also refers you to the shared responsibility model and service availability clause in their service agreement. In most cases, and I've read this a few times, in most cases it reads something like this: we strive to keep your services up and running. However, all online services suffer occasional disruptions and outages, and we, the cloud services provider, are not liable for any disruption or loss you may suffer as a result. In the event of an outage, you may not be able to retrieve your content or data that you have stored. We recommend that you regularly back up your content and data that you store on the services or store using third-party apps and services. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is not something that I'm picking up and coming up out of the sky on my own. These are actual documented statements that are publicly available for most of the cloud service provider out there. All you need to do is Google up service availability clause of their service agreement. Misconception number 5 and misconception number 3 are somewhat related, so I'll address them together. However, they are both important, hence why I call them out separately. The customer will be able to access the data hosted with my cloud service provider all the time, and customer will be able to move workloads from one cloud service provider to another with ease. Really, there are 2 terms that any cloud customer should consider when signing up with a cloud service provider: vendor lock-in and vendor lockout. Now, what do they mean? Vendor lockout. A vendor lockout occurs when a customer is unable to recover or access their own data due to the cloud service provider going into bankruptcy or otherwise leaving the market. Though bankruptcy is almost unheard of, cloud service providers quietly leaving the market is somewhat rather common, and this has happened in the past. Vendor lock-in. Vendor lock-in occurs in a situation where a customer may be able to leave, may be unable to leave. migrate, or transfer to an alternate provider due to technical or non-technical constraints. The situation is pretty common, and it's the best interest of the cloud service provider to want to continue serving the customer and keep their business. Hence why cloud services provider offer extended discounts when the customers sign up for a multi-year deal. It's good for the customer from a cost perspective, but they should always plan to have an exit strategy from these cloud providers. Now that we've looked at the misconceptions, I want to summarize it, right? It's no longer viable for IT leaders and administrators to focus on securing the external environment security controls alone. A firewall here and an antivirus for your endpoints are no longer sufficient. According to KPMG Australia, a new cybercrime is being reported in Australia every 7 minutes. During the last financial year 2022, over 76,000 cybercrimes were reported. The lion's share of the business that were impacted were medium-sized businesses, which suffered the highest average loss. The report further states $276,323 is the average loss a business email compromise attack would cost you. And on average, it takes about 23 days to resolve an attack to an actual environment. This goes up to 51 days if the threat was an insider threat, initiated by a contractor or an employee. Hence the need for an offensive and defensive strategy to securing your cloud environment. Employing both offensive and defensive strategies for the cloud security means taking a comprehensive and balanced approach to protect cloud resources and the data from various security threats and risks. What do they mean? Defensive strategy and offensive strategy. All these fans of NRL, they would know. A defensive strategy, the defensive aspect of cloud security involves implementing measures to prevent, detect, and respond to potential security threats and vulnerabilities. These include setting up firewalls, access controls, encryptions, regular security updates to safeguard cloud infrastructure and data from unauthorized access and cyber attacks. Defensive measures focus on building strong barriers to keep threats out that ensure cloud resources are well protected. Offensive strategy. The offensive aspect of cloud security involves actively seeking and identifying potential vulnerabilities and weaknesses in the cloud environment. This may include conducting penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, and threat hunting to proactively discover and address security flaws before malicious actors exploit them. Often, measures focus on taking proactive approach to identify and fix potential weaknesses. By combining both offensive and defensive strategies, customers can create a robust and proactive cloud security posture. Defensive measures help in protecting against known threats and implementing best security practices, while offensive measures help in identifying and addressing potential unknowns or emerging threats. This comprehensive approach ensures that the customers are actively and reactively addressing security risks, making the cloud environment more resilient and secure. We shall explore some of the offensive and defensive strategy in securing your cloud over the next 2 slides. The suggestions by far are not exhaustive, and I'm sure that there are definitely other strategies out there that you can use in your cloud environment, as the threat in the cloud is constantly evolving. Proactive threat hunting. Deploy tools in your cloud environment that will proactively search and detect threats in your environment. These tools are able to detect abnormal change rate and the entropy rate in your environment and alert you on possible threats. It's important that the tools monitor the change rate and the entropy rate, as in some cases, just monitoring the high change rate could lead to false positive, as a high change rate could be a normal production occurrence. A typical ingestion period for ransomware in a customer's environment is anywhere from 60 to 90 days. These days, in some cases, they go back as far back as 120 days. It's important that you stay ahead of the curve and be able to detect any unusual changes to your environment early. It's also advisable that these tools are deployed to your users' endpoint devices as well, as these are primarily the main point of entry to your environment. Leveraging security information and event management tool, SIEM, security orchestration, automation, and response tool, SOAR, and extended detection and response tool, XDR. These tools will help to streamline the mundane, repetitive tasks and improve the overall response time to potential security threats. Automated incident response activities, such as automatically preserving the backup snapshot of a machine that has an abnormal change rate on the day before, could help to preserve the state of the machine before it was compromised. The report from CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency in the US, America's primary cyber defense agency, determined in 2022 report that highly impactful ransomware attack occurs on holidays and long weekends when offices are usually closed. And this is a common occurrence across the board. As such, any tool that has an automated responses capability will be highly useful when your admins are away on leave. Based on the appetite of your organization's business impact analysis, you could potentially employ various types of penetration testing. This could be a white box, a black box, or a gray box penetration testing of your environment. These activities could be carried out internally or also by engaging an external consultant. It's usually advisable to engage an external consultant that perform these activities as it is part of their business offering. They are usually updated with the latest threat in the wild and will be also able to assist you in identifying the vulnerabilities and weaknesses in your infrastructure, and also the methods to address these vulnerabilities. Additionally, the outcome of this test will also help to validate existing controls or processes that are currently in place in your organization. Leveraging cloud-native security controls. In most cases, every organization will have a preference in the security tools that they use. Someone's going to be in love with one of the security tools out there in the market. This could either be due to a tool that was inherited from the organization's inception, or to the preference of the IT organization that is managing and using the tool. They could be experts in the tool, where to a point, and I've seen this, they might be able to even develop custom scripts to monitor native cloud workloads. These are great, but the legacy tool was deployed to monitor your on-prem environment and on-prem application. My suggestion would be to combine the legacy tool and the cloud-native security tools provided by your cloud service provider. This will enhance your visibility and control over those cloud resources, as these tools are purpose-built for securing cloud environments. As such, the cloud services provider will constantly keep the native tool updated with the changes and feature updates of the native cloud services. Now, this is an important advice. It's important that if you employ a secure DevOps practices, if your organization is involved in the business of building custom apps for itself and also for external customers that will rely on its services. This will ensure that the security considerations are part of every stage of the development and deployment of the application. In most cases, organizations will engage external consultants in combination with in-house staff for knowledge transfer and shadowing. It's a common practice for these external contractors to create backdoor access to the application that is being developed in order to provide support assistance to your in-house employees for any feature development or even updates. You could be friends and you could build a backdoor access to help your colleague that was supporting you while you're contracted into the organization. By ensuring a secure DevOps process, these issues can be avoided. There's a saying about cybersecurity experts. A human being is still the weakest link in cybersecurity. Excuse me. It could be a new employee that recently joined the organization, a senior veteran that is overconfident, or more commonly, a disgruntled employee. There are other options to limit the risk of a disgruntled employee, which we'll explore in the next slide. But for the first two, human factor, constant threat intelligence and security awareness training are critical. I have seen organizations prevent and lock out access to applications to employees that fail in their quarterly security assessment training. There are a lot of organizations out there that provide these short security trainings that is delivered online, which you can roll out to your organization employees. Let us now explore the potential defensive strategies that your organization can use in securing a cloud environment. Again, this list is not exhaustive, and I'm just trying to recommend what I believe is the most relevant. It's important that any organization that wants to secure its environment to employ a strong identity and access management practice that will control how the users access its cloud resources, using multi-factor authentication to enhance authentication, security, and limit privilege based on the principles of least privilege to ensure users only have access to what they need. This should also be enforced to external contractors as well that potentially might have access to your environment, service providers, administrators, and etc. In some cases, external service providers admin might still have access to the cloud environment as they would have assisted your internal team during a pilot or a POC phase. It's important that you employ a tool that is able to flag these user accounts based on the last usage or password expiry policy to ensure that these accounts are disabled and deleted when it's no longer required. I have personally seen customers that have domain accounts of external service provider that are 2 to 3 years old when the project has already been done, but the last known access to their environment was just weeks ago. What's going on? It's important also to encrypt sensitive data both in transit and at rest to prevent unauthorized access and also to protect your data confidentiality. It is not only sufficient to utilize encryption technologies such as SSL, TLS for the data in transit and encryption keys for the data at rest, but you must also attempt to use the latest version of these technologies. It's no good that the organization leverages TLS if it's using TLS 1.1. When the current version of TLS is 1.3, and there's a huge difference in terms of security between these two versions. Configure a zero trust network security measure, including firewalls, network segmentation, virtual private clouds, in order to control and monitor traffic flow between cloud resources and the internet. Given that most cloud customers service their users and external customers to web traffic, it's important that you deploy a decent network firewall control. Website application firewalls, WAFs, prevent attacks on websites and applications that serve them in the backend. Regularly apply security patches and updates to the cloud infrastructure, virtual machines, and applications to address known vulnerabilities and protect against zero-day exploits. Employing the IT best practices on patch and release management will ensure that every patch are properly tested before it's rolled out to the production environment. Remember, you own the data, hence you are responsible for it. Apart from the advanced monitoring and logging tools that we talked about in the slide earlier, it's also important to implement comprehensive logging and monitoring of all the systems that are running in the cloud. These logs should be accurately and securely saved and protected to ensure that the admins are able to access and analyze them when it's needed. Develop and regularly update an incident and threat response plan that outlines the steps to be taken in case of a security breach. It's also very important to test the plan through tabletop exercises to ensure an effective response when needed, hence the requirement for regular DR testing. Last but not least, a proper backup tool that is preferably delivered as a SaaS solution that will allow you to store your data in an offsite and an air-gapped environment. The solution should also be able to facilitate a proper disaster recovery activity whenever required. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. There you have it. Those are my suggestions, and what are the misconceptions that we've covered, and also my suggestions now you can improve your security posture. I hope the session has been beneficial. And Hitika, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sentil. Actually, it was a very informative session, and I guess our attendees also shared the same sentiments. Before we go to our Q&A session, I would like to announce today's webinar is in sync with our CCSE certification. EC Council launched a first of its kind cloud security program, the Certified Cloud Security Engineer CCSE certification, a hands-on certification course designed and developed by cloud security professionals. The CCSE adopts a detailed and methodological approach to teach fundamental concepts in cloud security. EC Council's CCSE program combines vendor neutral and vendor specific cloud security concepts to offer aspiring cloud security professionals an learning approach. Benefits of the CCSE course includes help learners design and implement business continuity and disaster recovery plans in the cloud, demonstrates best practices for securing cloud infrastructures. If you are interested in learning more, please take part in the poll which is going to conduct now. So, Sandil, can we start the question?
Sure.
Our first question is, what are the current trends in cloud security?
The current trends in cloud security, as we spoke earlier, right? When I talk to a lot of customers, they are moving away from the conventional defensive option. You know, the defense. I mean, not moving away. They're using it in combination of proactive security measures as well. Defensive in the past is a lot of times, you know, in the past it used to be okay with just antivirus or with a basic firewall rule. You net your environment and you hide your IP address, right? Nowadays, it's more of using that in combination with preventive measures. You want to look at threat analysis. You want to look at your data. You want to look at the frequency of change. And it's important, right? When I said earlier, a lot of tools out there sometimes just offer change rate, which might not be accurate. What we found in the market is that if it's used in combination with the entropy rate, right, that's really effective. Because it actually allows you to actually tell you when the changes have occurred and exactly what's the rate of that change. So, because a lot of times, high amount of data change is a production thing. You might have a new financial year. You might have a new data that's coming in as part of your environment refresh. So that's common. So I think the current trend in the security market, what I've seen is a combination of proactive and defensive threat measures, tools to balance that out.
Thank you, Sentil. Our next question is how to manage DDoS attack in cloud environment.
Right. If you guys have seen earlier, right, the web application firewall, the web application firewalls are pretty good in attacking DDoS and also SQL injection. So employing that tool, plus at the same time, if you're with any of the cloud service provider, right, as I've stated earlier, they offer native built-in tools that are able to specifically block out those attacks. You know, DDoS, SQL injection are pretty common. So the cloud service provider, knowing that you've actually subscribed to them and they know that the native services that they provide, they have built the native tools that will be able to protect those workloads in far more secure way than your traditional on-prem based tool. So the suggestion is to use them in combination where it's relevant. So for example, in your environment, you probably won't have, if you're subscribing to any of the cloud services provider, you might not have identity and access management tool that's on-prem. So you might subscribe to that natively. Or you might subscribe to name resolution services natively, or you might even subscribe to a load balancer natively. So these instances are no longer physical or virtual or even servers where it was in the past. So nowadays it's more offered as a service. So if you use and leverage the native tools provided by these cloud vendors, that'll be much more preferable. I think that will be more effective than just relying on your native tools that you have on-prem.
Thank you so much, Sentil. Our next question is, do CNAP and CSPM help to secure cloud?
Sorry, what was that again?
CNAP and CNAPP or CSPM help to secure cloud?
CMAP. I'm not too sure of that. Perhaps can I come back to that on that aspect? CNAP platforms, right? Cloud. So let me come back to that. I'm not too sure of that. Can I come back to the question again?
Sure. I would like to ask our attendees who has this kind of question, please write to us. We can convey our speaker the questions so that he can answer separately on email.
Yep.
Moving to our next question.
Sure. Yeah. If you could, or maybe you ask them to type it in, maybe that'll be easier for me to understand what was it.
Sure, I will paste it in your chat. So before that, we will take the next question. What are the best security practices for AWS?
What do you mean by best security practices? Is it to secure the environment, or because your AWS offer various services, right? So are you talking about just the EC2 instances? Are you talking about services that you subscribe, or are you what type of workloads are you running PaaS natively in there? So yeah, can you be a bit more specific? Because the tools that you would employ differs from these tools, right? Because for example, if you're running, say for example, in this instance, let me take that. So if you're running VMC on AWS, VMC and VMware on AWS, so essentially you're using running bare metal services and you're running VMware on your AWS, right? So in that aspect, your security tools that you use kind of stay similar, but you could also leverage what are the other tools that's available that is offered by VMware in combination of what's available within AWS. But if you're relying on native services that's available within AWS, then I would defer you to the native services protection that they have, right? For example, WAFs would work. They also have various tools in terms of securing against DDoS attack, SQL injection attack. They also have load balancer controls. They have also logics in there to prevent, ping of that, the DDoS attacks as well within that application. So you might want to also look at that.
Okay. We will move to our next question, but Sentil, I have already pasted in your chat box the last question.
Sure. Okay. I think I got that. The CNAP and CPSM, right? Yes, I would guess so, because I think what happens is these are terms that are sort of coined by Gartner itself around how they can secure application, how they can assist and drive cloud native security solutions. So if you employ those best practices in that aspect, yes, they will. I'm sure they are, and because they talk about what are the best practices that you could, right? So based on the workload that you run in the cloud, based on what you use in the cloud. So my opinion, yes, because it looks at the posture, right? Security posture. It looks at your overall analysis. How based on the application that you run, it is able to provide analysis on the security posture that you should take. And it's also, I think it also looks at the workload that you run as well.
Thank you, Sentil, for the answer. Our next question is um, how to develop a security system for a multi-cloud system.
Right. Um, that's that's a really good question, right? Because what we see a lot in the market right now is that it's not just one cloud; it's actually a multiple cloud. So it starts fundamentally in terms of having that granular level of control. So you go based on the least secure, least privilege mode. So grant access to workloads or to users where they need those specific workloads. You need to have a control environment. So within your VPC itself, you gate that control. So applications or customers that doesn't need to have access to a specific set of VPC do not access that VPC. And from a traffic flow perspective, you isolate and segregate the VPC. So in that aspect, there is no broadcast within the network. If in case there is a compromise or is an attack within a specific VPC segment, the others does not get affected. So you control and isolate. Additionally, in terms of security, when you look at multi-cloud, right, you got to look at how you can port data across from one cloud to another. So data portability is critical, and you should also look at how do you prevent from vendor lock-in. So a lot of times it works on behalf of the cloud provider to be able to lock in um, by getting you to run on their specific code, right, on your specific file structure. So if you get into that issue, if you get into that, and then you decide that at one point the cloud cost is too expensive, and you want to relocate and you want to move, that becomes an issue. So you should ideally look for a vendor or a tool that's able to allow you to move from one cloud to another. That gives you one, the power to negotiate to the cloud service provider. Second, it allows you portability. Third, it allows you to move your workload in terms of DR and also load balance your workload. So for example, infrastructure that's non-critical could remain in another cloud, and infrastructure that's critical where you want to leverage most of the native services could sit in another cloud. And they could communicate to each other through your secured communication channel, either through Direct Connect or Express Gateway, and you could also communicate specifically within the VPCs as well.
Thank you, Senthil. Our next question is, what are the best practices to protect the cloud infrastructure?
Okay, so I'll look at it from this perspective, right? So if you're looking at cloud infrastructure, I'm assuming that you're probably using infrastructure as a services, or maybe you have sort of like an orchestration layer. So in that aspect, identity and access management tool becomes important. Threat analysis becomes very important. Secure password protocol controls, right? So password enforcement policy, complex password, and you ensure that the password also has a password expiry as well, that prevents the users from recycling the password. One of the things that I found that was a kind of, I'd say, a bit surprising is that nowadays when you get into cloud, you don't go there directly. So you have a lot of times you have service integrators helping you, you have customer solutions architect helping you out, you have the customer's professional services or vendors professional services helping you out. And they usually come in and deploy an environment that's called a pilot or a proof of concept environment. And then you start using it, and they are in there, they assist you, as you start and ramping up your environment. Now, once it's done and it converts into production, the project might still be ongoing, right? So they still continue to have access to the environment as you go along the production cycle. That's well and fine if you trust the resource, but at some point you got to also look at whether do they need to have those access. Well, it might be beneficial, it might be well intended, but it's also exposing your environment to unwanted access by an external individual that's not part of your organization. So imagine if that individual account unintentionally gets compromised, it can then be used to to a privilege elevation level attack to your organization, and you're completely unrelated in this issue. But for the mere fact that the person's account was in your system as well, and it also had administrative privileges, you're now exposed to unwanted risk. So that is very important. The other thing as well, I find that a lot of times when customers design and deploy workloads in the cloud, there's not much thought process that's given in terms of how they design the network, how they want to isolate and segregate the traffic, right? Because in the past, coming back from on-prem environment, you set up a VPN and that's pretty much it. I think you need to bring it across to the cloud as well. So you group and you channel the traffic and you ensure that applications that need to talk to applications on another VPC have that communication available, but the others don't actually get to do that. So you can employ microsegmentation, you can employ VPC control. So you limit the traffic flow, and even if one of the workloads does get exposed, you limit the attack vector as well. So it's sort of isolated. There are other tools in the market that I know of, and this is also very critical, that can able to do a ransomware recovery as well. So it leverages the entropy rate, it leverages the change rate, and it's able to take a snapshot. It's able to get you to restore a copy based on the entropy rate, so you can create a snapshot. And then as you recover the VM, you recover it in an isolated environment that's disconnected from your production environment. Once that's done, the tool itself will run analysis and go through the vulnerability checks against the system and determine if the machine's vulnerable or not. Now, once that staging is done, it then also has the capability for you to actually allow you to open up network traffic. Because a lot of times if a machine's compromised and you restore it to isolated environment and you run scans against it, it comes up clean. Because essentially the malware is just waiting for it to establish connectivity to its home base. So it's doing a call home. So you can open an external connection out, and then you could probably start seeing any activity within the VM itself. So these are the tools that's out there in the market, and I think these are the ones that you should explore, that is able to provide you with some level of threat analysis and some level of inspection against the machine versus the native applications or native security tools that you might have traditionally.
Thank you, Sentil. We will take our last question. That is, what exactly is an entropy?
So entropy, if you look, okay, so if you look at a change rate, right? Change rate looks at how much of data that's been changed in the environment, right? But the entropy is like a variable. What is the gap between that change, right? What is the abnormality rate of that change? So that's how it looks at that abnormality change, for example. So let's assume in this case a workload's been infected, and you run a baseline test, right? So a lot of new data comes in, and then system goes through a baseline. So from a change rate perspective, that's not much of a change rate. But all of a sudden, the entropy rate goes up. Basically, what that means is that the differences between from the copy before and the copy after that, there's a huge gap in terms of that change rate. And there's an abnormal change in entropy rate. So that's how the entropy rate is defined.
Thank you so much, Sentil. Thank you actually once again for answering all these questions. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you. Before we conclude the webinar, would you like to give a small message to our audience?
Sure. Um, I guess what I guess what's important is in the cloud, and what's changing is that you need to look at it cohesively. And I think the idea of using in combining defensive and preventive security measure is going to be important, right? So I think that's the trend that's coming up in the market now. I think that's what you guys should probably explore as well.
Thank you for your message, Sentil. Before we end the session, I would like to announce our next Cyber Talk session, which is Network Security Fundamentals Understanding Threats and Vulnerabilities, is scheduled for 18th August 2023. The session is an expert presentation by Merlin Bium. The registration for the session, please go to our website, which is www.eccu.edu/cyber-talks. The link is given in the chat section. Hope to see you all on coming 18th August. With this, we end the session. You may disconnect your line. Thank you so much.